And but has anyone heard about testing in general or anything? Like what is like when people ask you or talk to you about tests, what are some things that come to mind? Let
Mostly
me
like
check.
the question that I've gotten before, like was with our mentors was like, oh, how have you been testing your app? How did you test your backend? And we were just like, I don't know. I think we just did it Postgres, but we were so confused. So we would, yeah, it was just like a basic question of like, how are you testing?
Okay, uh-huh. And you have been testing your apps. It's just the way that you've been doing it is by hand and manually, like, right? You change something in the back end and you check with Postman if you got what you were expecting to get.
I have a
Um,
question.
yeah, go ahead.
Last night I was looking into Firestore and they have a testing part. Is that part of it or no?
Um, is that part of what of
Like
this?
testing of testing, yeah.
I think I'm not sure. I'm not sure I understand correctly. That's probably what my intuition is saying is that that is probably a bunch of helper functions to test your Firestore setup, basically.
Oh, okay.
Um, we won't see that specifically here today. We're gonna focus on like only React, but my hope is to also give you a general introduction of testing as a whole.
Oh, okay.
Let me share my screen here and we can take some notes. Screen share. Um, so, okay. Let's, anything else you have heard about testing?
Just for like exams, I remember there are some exams that sort of like you can run tests to sort of it will tell you like what questions you got right or wrong based on functions and stuff that happen on another page. So yeah.
And you said like in an assessment or an exam?
Yeah,
That was you guys's what unit was that? Because you remember?
I'm trying to remember whether or not it was like maybe three. I'm gonna maybe one of the, I'm not I don't remember which one where I saw it, but yeah, early on I was probably two, maybe two, maybe ish around there.
We had some tests in Unit 1. We also had it for our
Okay.
DSA assessment, had specs.
All right, yeah. So unit one, sorry.
Okay. Um, so we've been doing manually so far. Also, and what was like the intent? Why did those assessments had those automatic tests? What do you think, Marvin?
Just so that we can um like it's sort of I guess like helps us form like see what's wrong going on in real time or what's wrong in sort of like real time instead of having to like I'm trying to find a better way to like ways to like word what I'm coming up with, but pretty much we want to be able to I don't know like I don't know reassess our thinking maybe. I'm really bad with words. I'm sorry.
I think you summed it out. Like, oh, actually, there's
Yeah,
somebody else.
Yeah, there
yeah, I
we
was gonna
go.
say like the test cases are maybe like meant to help guide you in your conditions and your what exactly how you're solving the problem. So yeah.
Right. That will be like finding finding edge cases as well. Edge cases. That's correct. And you have been exposed, like you've been interacting with tests as well in the past where when you do like code wars or when you do lit code, all those have automated tests. But basically, tests are about finding what's wrong fast, finding if something broke so that you can go and fix it. And why, so here we're sort of talking about testing in general. Why do you think, any ideas for why would you want to find what's wrong fast?
Because the errors can like pile up. Like for example,
Okay.
if you have one error and you continue to work on it, you might have a new error that's affected by the old error, and so forth.
That's a good one. Errors can compile up. What else? And thinking now, maybe of your, thinking of testing your apps. If you could test your apps, so you could have a person, if you could hire a person that tests your app, why would you want to do that?
Because you want to make sure that your app doesn't break with like normal usage of your app.
That's correct. You want to make sure that your app works, basically.
Because as the developers, we wrote the app, so we will always use it the right way. An actual user doesn't necessarily think the way that we do. So like we would never enter, like if we know we need a string, we would never try to enter numbers.
That is a very good
actual
point.
user wouldn't know how we wrote it, so they'll just work what works for them.
That is a very important point. And I'll summarize that as I put it here, as verifying your assumptions, trying different, and sort of kind of connects to finding edge cases as well. Okay, cool. Yeah, we want to test our apps to make sure that they're working. And we want automated tests so that we don't have to spend a lot of time checking if it's working. I understand you guys are gonna start your capstone project soon. In the way that I built my capstone project, since I'm a Pursuit Fellow as well from 4.0, was we will, it was kind of funny actually, when every pull request, we will say, make sure that it works, or after we pull, after we merge a pull request, we'll all pull and check that everything worked like by hand. We'll spend like half or an hour checking that nothing broke with the latest code that came in that pull request. But again, we were doing that manually so far. My hope is that from today you learn how to test at least your front end, and you write some tests for your capstone projects that will have you not have to test your front end manually to see that everything works. And yeah, basically do it fast. Like running these tests will, once we write the test, will take maybe 2 seconds to see if everything is fine. And once something is wrong, then you know where to go look and why the tests fail. Okay, so let's jump in. I have shared this in the calendar invite. I'm going to share this link here again. This is what we're going to follow today. Oh, also, like, let me see. Oh, please flag anything that you see in the chat. Any questions? Feel free to leave them in the chat as well, or just raise your hand or mute yourself at any point. And yeah, flag anything that comes up in the chat, since it's a bit hard for me to monitor it at the moment as I'm sharing my screen. But let me share. I just shared that README. And let's jump into it. Grab my water. Okay, so any preliminary questions from what we talked about? Okay, cool. So for testing our React apps, we're going to be using something called the React Testing Project. The React Testing Project is a library of individual libraries with testing utilities, basically, which are just a bunch of functions that you can call. There's a React testing library, Vue testing library, React Native testing library, and there is a ton of others. Now, one important part about testing that I want you to keep in mind throughout this is you want your test to resemble the way your users will use your app. because the more your tests resemble the way the users interact with your app, the more confidence they will give you. And that confidence is in confidence that your app is doing what it's supposed to do for your users, ultimately. That your users can accomplish the goals they set out to do in your app. And this was like one of the trickiest part, like thinking from the side of the user, and not getting to entangle into the implementation. So keep this guiding principle in mind. It's not mine, comes from the testing library itself. Sort of tying all of that, we want to test our apps for functionality and not for implementation. What that means is you want to check that your app gets the job done. It doesn't matter as much how it does it. And an example here is, let's say, I understand you guys started using React hooks from the get-go. Our class used React State first, and I'm sure you also remember React State. But let's say we implemented a form using React State to sign up for an event. If you write your test in a user-centric way, with the React testing library, it doesn't matter if you then update or refactor your app to use hooks, your test should still pass because you're testing for functionality, not for implementation of like how something specifically was done. So we're gonna see some functions, and those I hope to make the connection for how those are how the user will find or how a user would interact with your app. Okay, so that's this is the tooling that we're gonna use, the React testing library. And here, let's just talk a little bit about like the different types of testing, more in general. So there's unit testing. And in any system, it doesn't matter if it's a backend app, a front-end app, any system whatsoever like that you can think about is made out of units. There's components that are independent and they talk to each other. And again, this could even be not necessarily applied to software engineers. Any system is made out of units of some kind. Now, a unit test, like I drew it here with this green circle, focusing on testing the individual unit as an independent unit, basically. And in our code, this generally means single functions or single components. A unit will be a single function or a single component. And you want to write lots of this. Integration testing, as its word suggests, is testing the integration between two components, like, and also said something like testing the contract between units, in this case, for our purpose of React, in components. This is like, if you have a component that has a child, what is the relationship between those two components, and how do they work together? If you change one thing in one, how does it affect the parent? Or if you change something in the parent, how does it affect the child? That kind of test. And we're going to see a little bit of this in today. Now, there's the last kind called end-to-end or system testing. That is when you test the system as a whole, and that's why I have circled everything sort of in green. You test the whole thing. And these tests, this kind of tests, we're not gonna see today. These are usually slow because they're bigger. They involve the entire system. If you're thinking of an app, this kind of test will involve your front end, your back end, your database, all that as well. Any questions up until here about these three types or comments?
So unit testing is like individual, right? And what was it called? Integration testing is just the relationship, right? It's just like testing how they interact, whether it's parent-child, child-parent, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So that's cool. Just wanted to make sure like I understood the distinction between the two. And then end-to-end is the entire thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Cool.
that makes sense. Okay.
Cool. Thank you for that summary. That was pretty good. Other questions or thoughts? Okay, let me know as we advance. So how much how many tests should you write? This is the testing pyramid. I did not invent this. It comes from an article that I think I linked it. Maybe I didn't link it. But basically, you should have a lot of unit tests, the base sort of your testing strategy. A few integration tests or less on integration tests, and even fewer end-to-end tests. Now, oops, somebody's drawing in the screen. Also, I like this pyramid. This is by a guy called Martin Fowler, and also these arrows are pretty interesting. Unit tests are faster. The time they take to run is fast, and integration tests are slower, and that increases in this fashion. To the bottom faster, to the top slower, as well as this on this right side. Unit tests, as we talked about in isolation, specific units is more isolation, end-to-end more integration, like you're testing the entire thing. So a general rule, like there's no hard rule on how many exactly, but you should definitely have more unit tests than integration tests than end-to-end tests as a whole. Okay, now a few things to consider in the context of React testing. With components, it's a bit tricky to differentiate between like a unit and an integration test. Because if you have a form that has maybe like nested components, should you test those components independently and then the form, or should you test the form only, which will sort of cover the child components? My recommendation here for that is, if at the moment, if your component maybe is, if your component is simple, but it takes some props, it takes some props, and it does some, even if it's minor logic or math, you should test it in isolation. That's my recommendation. Even if it's small, if it takes some props, and if it does some math or a little bit of logic, like maybe it has a ternary that shows something based on a prop that gets passed, test it individually. Only when, ask yourself this question, like if you have a button, should the component, should that button have its own state? And this is also another guiding question. If you refactor the component, should that break the form test? That this question can help you guide whether if refactoring the component will break the form test, then you should probably test it in isolation as a unit. In React, there is not a lot of like, we don't have to think a lot about like this, or have it, watch it very carefully about like, is this a unit test or an integration test? I will say just start from your child components, asking if they are working in isolation. You can test them in isolation. Another thing there is sort of what is also kind of implicitly explaining this pyramid here, iteration speed versus realistic environment. So it turns out that to perform an end-to-end test, you will actually need a browser that you automate. There's browsers that you can control like from the command line or through interfaces and methods. You will need a realistic environment. That's end-to-end tests require a realistic environment, which will require a browser. Again, will require your backend, your database, the entire system. But those, running those kind of tests take longer, and when one of those tests fails, it's harder to know what broke, because was it in the front end or was it in the back end? Was it something with the form itself, or was it the route that handles the information that got that got sent in the request? So that's a realistic environment. And unit test, the test that we're going to be doing today, unit and integration test, offer a fast iteration speed. What that means basically is that you make a change in your component and you can test it immediately. And those tests take very little time to run, like seconds, really. But this is, when we have integration and unit tests, we're not in a realistic environment. So for instance, we will not be, our test will be, even though it seems like we have a DOM, well, we do have a DOM, but we have a JS DOM, which is a JavaScript implementation of the DOM. The DOM is implemented generally by the browser, and the DOM lives inside of the browser. But we want to test our apps, and we don't want to fire up an entire browser to test the app. We'll use it. We'll do that using just JS DOM, which is a DOM implementation in JavaScript for use in Node.js, basically. So each browser implements its own DOM in probably in the programming language that the browser is written in, and how it works, and then it gives functions to JavaScript to interact with that DOM. But here we'll be using the JS DOM, which again is our app. What this really means is that our app will not be running in the browser; it will be running in Node, and that has some limitations. For instance, stuff that you have in the browser that you're not going to get in JS DOM. I was actually looking at it here. Customizing. Actually, maybe I did not get it here. Yeah, unimplemented parts of the web. So for instance, in this JS DOM, you don't have navigation, so you can't test. You can test that a link will take you to a separate page, basically. You also cannot test style, so you can't test if your CSS is painting the element of a certain kind. For that, we'll need a different kind of testing that I linked to in the resources, but we're not going to talk about it here. Just have in mind that there are features of the browser that we're not going to have in this environment. Also, a question that I had was, does it have like the local storage? Let's see. Local. Seems that maybe it doesn't have local storage support. Let's do a quick search here in the issues. Let's see if there's anything that pops up saying local storage. For instance, if your app relies on local storage for something, local storage is something that I believe is only on the browser. Maybe this implementation has something for local storage. Local storage. Okay, local storage can be spied on. So okay, this is telling us that the local storage is implemented. So if your app uses something for the local storage, it will work. It just says that it can't be spied on. It's not available. Opaque origins, but this kind of tells me that it is implemented. But if you have questions about what is available and not, just dig into the documentation of JS DOM, and the issues I always find helpful as well. Okay, let's go back here. So we'll be using the JS DOM. We actually don't need to install it. We'll talk about that a little bit in the setup. I do wanted to also show you or just introduce you to this realistic environment to create end-to-end tests. There are different tools. One of those is Cypress. And let me just show you here a little bit. Cypress is a tool that basically, you can see here the screenshot, is a browser. It's a browser that then you can tell instructions like visit that website, wait for a handwritten, get that element, scroll that element into view, then click, then wait, and so on. I don't know if you guys can see this up here, but it's a browser that you can tell it, you're basically telling it what to do, and then if the browser manages to carry those tasks out, it will tell you that the test pass or fail. But we can see here that it is a browser. It's a browser that you can script and automate. But again, running this test, because it has to spin the browser and all that, take longer. And it's also harder to find what went wrong. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't write end-to-end tests. That means that make sure you have enough unit tests and integration tests before writing end-to-end tests. Let's go back here. Okay, any questions about that we talked about? Or thoughts?
So we're going to be using both JS DOM and Cypress, or just like one of the two?
Good question to clarify. We will only be using JS DOM, which comes with Jest. Yeah, we will not be using Cypress. Cypress is sort of the plug for you to go and explore, but we won't be using it. Cool. Other questions or thoughts? Anyone?
I don't want to slow things down, but I recently found out that the end-to-end tests at Google, to test the entirety of Google, run about 12 hours. So they can only test the entirety of Google twice per day. And they run it twice per day just to make sure everything's running properly. That's how slow it is.
That's a cool fact. I didn't know. And it's actually, like, if you think about it, it's actually kind of okay, because we could think of the infrastructure that Google has, and that it can be done in a day. It's interesting. Yeah. But you said 24 hours?
Well, they run it twice every 24 hours because it takes a full 12 hours for it to run the entirety of its end-to-end testing.
I see. Cool. Thanks for the fact there. Okay, so let's get hands-on. So for this, what we'll do here is I have an app here that we're gonna use to test, and this app is, I'm not sure if you guys 6.4 did this lab, but this was a lab we used for the props lab, and it was basically creating this GoFundMe page. Did you guys create this 6.4 or something like this at any point?
Marvin, you're on mute. I don't remember.
I think we did.
From my class, remember?
Yeah, I think we did.
I think we did. This looks familiar.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think we'll take a look at the code as nothing surprising. You know now as React developers how you will go about creating this app. Basically here is like, outline are the components by different colors, and I included here like what I think about the component tree, which is app is the main component. That's the one that handles state. All the others are functional components or stateless components. And that app has four children: header, recent donation, progress bar, and form. And recent donation has a donation card because recent donation will show a list. And that matches what we have here. So let me share this link. What I want you to do is to clone this app and install its dependencies, and we'll move from there. Where is the chat here? Chat. Oh, also, I think I need to clone it as well. Okay, so I'm gonna clone it here. Oops, actually, it's not this one. It's this one. Okay, and then give me a thumbs up once you have installed dependencies. Okay, so as you guys can see on my screen, the app is inside of this folder, React app. I cloned it, and the folder that I cloned was Pursuit Core Web Testing React App Starter. Let's go to React app and then npm install. Any questions or comments so far? I'm looking at you like down here on my second screen, so it's a bit weird. Okay, my dependencies installed, and we should be ready to go. So let me open this with VS Code. And we have our app here. Cool. So React app. Let's fire it up. npm start. Oh, forgetting that I have to cd into the React app folder. Let's see. Make sure that it's running. Cool. And these are the tests that that we will automate. Let's make this form. Nice, and then it appears here basically in the donation, the recent donation section, basically. And you know, at first you could think of, well, this was really quick. I tested it manually, it works. It was quick. Why would I want to spend maybe an hour writing a test, an automated test? But as we were talking, like how errors can compile. No, that was not the word. Yeah, compile up. How the errors can pile up. If you have the entire system and you have to test it manually, all that time will also pile up. And at some point, your automated tests will run faster than your manual tests. That's why we do it in the first place. Okay, let me put you around here. Let's go back to VS Code. Again, at any point, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. Terms need to ask me to slow down or revisit any concept. Okay, so we have our app is running. We tested it manually, it works. I'm gonna kill it. We're not gonna have to run it, so we're testing. Then let's take a look to what is next here. I should close some stuff that I'm not using. This. Okay. Okay, so let's just take a quick sort of look around the app here. Go to source app. As we see, this has state. It has some hard-coded state for demonstration purposes in terms of donation, target amount, base amount. This is, again, it's hard-coded just for simplicity for us to explore the topic of testing. Most likely this information will come from your backend, and you'll pass it as props to your components, etc. And we'll see a little bit of that. But basically, we have app. App has the state. We have functions that modify that state, like handle submit, handle form input, for instance, and so on. We have this function handle submit, for instance, will make a network request with post donation, which will send, if this was our app, it will send our information to our backend. Here, I'm sending this information to the JSON placeholder API, which won't save the information forever. That information gets deleted like I don't remember exactly, but like 2 minutes after it has been posted. But the point here is that you will make a network request to somewhere, to some backend somewhere else that is outside of your project. And we're going to see how to handle that. But basically, we have functions to modify the state, and then here we deconstruct the state, and then we call our children components like header. Header doesn't take any props. Recent donation takes an array of donations. Progress bars takes 2 props, one the raised amount so far and the target amount that we're shooting for. Form takes 5 props. The values for the donor input box, for the message input box, for the amount input box, the handle submit and handle form input functions. Any questions or anything surprising about this component? No questions or thoughts? Maybe a thought will be that's outdated using React State.
I was looking at that, like those first thoughts, and I was like, it's fine. But I was like, that's a lot of code.
Definitely makes it longer. Okay, so let's just take a quick look at progress bar and form. So we have these components here. Let's take a look at progress bar. Progress bar, what kind of component is this? Who can tell me what kind of component is this? What are the types of components? Yeah, Marvin?
I'm sorry. I don't know if somebody else wanted to answer. It's a functional component, right? It's just like a
functional component.
Yeah.
What is another way in which those components are known?
Like display? No.
Those are dumb components.
Yeah.
Dumb component, that's a good one. There's another one that I actually said it at the beginning. A dumb component or functional component, those are 2 good ones. Does this component have state?
Stateless component.
Stateless component, there we go. Those are all 3 descriptions that can describe this component pretty well. Now we can see that it has just an H2 and it has a paragraph that displays the raised amount, interpolating the raised amount of whatever target amount. The target amount here, this is something we'll see a little bit later, but is the target amount is in a span tag with a class text muted just for display purposes to show the target amount in a different color. I'm not sure if you noticed that when we had the app running, but yeah, actually I can show you here. See how the target amount, this is the raised amount so far, and this is the target amount. Target amount is that grayish. That's just what that did there. That's why it's wrapped in a span, but that's a consideration we're going to take for once we start running our test. What else is here? That progress bar is implemented with just 2 divs. This progress bar here to show the percentage. It's just 1 div. The outer div is the gray background, and the inner div is the green background with the width set to that percentage. This is the way in which that is done. We have a progress div and a progress bar BG success div. Importance here, These are just for accessibility concerns. The value that they have, which are good to include, but not super important at this point. But the important an important detail here is the style. The style that we're passing here, as we can see, is a function, an object here that has a width property. And that width property will be equal to whatever progress is and adding the percentage symbol at the end, right? And progress is just literally the formula for calculating any percentage. You take the race amount multiplied by 100 divided by the target amount. And you get then a number. We add that percentage, and we just pass that because we want that inner div to have that width, basically. This is styling. This is styling from within JavaScript. We're not using CSS for this because, well, it will be a bit more complicated to do it with CSS, but this is easier because we know exactly how big that div would be. And we know also that that div changes, the inner div, the green div here, will change its width as we are adding donations. So we want to recalculate this amount on each one of those and update the width, therefore then showing sort of the progress. Questions or thoughts about this component?
Just to be clear, the percentage after on line 7, that's for the width percentage, right? And
That's
then
correct.
the percentage on line 20 is for the progress percentage.
Let me see line 20. Line 20.
Fine. Yeah.
Yeah, right. This is the one that's correct. This is the one that we display. This is what the user will see. That is like this 44.10%. That is correct. Actually, we could have used just a string and reuse it here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, great. Okay. Then the next component that we need to look at is the form. The form is a stateless component as well. We see the information that's coming from the parent in props. We have a function for handle input change that we could have passed from the parent directly, but here just for ease of use. And what that function does is just calls the one that came from the parent handle form input. It will pass the ID and the value of that input. And here we just have a simple form with a handle submit. We have, we'll talk about this in a little bit. We have some divs, we have some inputs, we have labels. We need those labels, we'll see why. And any form you create, always make sure that you have labels for accessibility reasons. We just see that we set the value. These are pretty common pattern, value and a function to update the state on change. And that's basically all of them. We do have one interesting one here that we'll take a look later. This input, which is of type range, this is what gives us this slider, as is also known, input type range. We need to handle a special case with this input there. We'll see once we write that test. But everything else is pretty much the same. Value, unknown change, the pattern, and min and max for the range, as its name suggests. And lastly, here we just have a button to submit the form, to actually hit donate, and we have this paragraph to show the whatever value we have selected. This paragraph is this little 5 here, so that when we move the slider, this paragraph also updates showing the amount that we have selected. Any questions about the form? Oops.
Question.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about, like, what's the block quote tag? I've never seen that one. Do you know?
Actually, I don't remember exactly. I think we could do a quick Google search. Block quote HTML. I think so. I did not write this app. Actually, this app I think is from Amin, is one of the 6.2 fellows. This was his solution, and he was using Bootstrap. And I'm thinking that blog quote may be something he got from Bootstrap, but I'm not sure. I mean, do you have any context that you want to provide? Or maybe not.
Yeah, I don't remember how I got it, but yeah, probably from Bootstrap examples.
Uh-huh. Oh, so send that quotation. It seems that will be what provides sort of like this format there. It's not something that we really need in this example. But it's basically for quoting text once you're quoting text in HTML. Yeah, that's actually completely forgotten about. All the elements that I still don't know. But yeah, that are interesting to take a look at. Great. Oh yeah, we can see here that the blog quote is used for like maybe aligning the text to the right according to Bootstrap. And that's what gives us that. That's what gives us, yeah, the 5 like on that side. Okay, other questions in the form? Okay, so let's take 5 minutes, just explore the other components. Just take a look at it. Let me know if you have any question. Let's talk about it. And then after that, we can truly get hands-on, writing some tests. Any questions? Feel free to. So I'm actually going to cut the timer a bit earlier. Any questions or thoughts on the other components? Okay. I'm not sure I stopped that. Yep. Cool. So let's get back here. So these are some of the tools that we're gonna take a look at. Just the React testing library. You should check out those resources. Let me open them here. Just we talked about. We're also going to use a library called user event. Justum and user event come with the React testing library. So we won't need to install them separately. Jest is a testing framework for JavaScript, not only for React. You can test any JavaScript with it. There is a Pursuit volunteer, Orta, that you might have come in contact with. He's a very active contributor to this project. In fact, he was the one that proposed the redesign of this website with this really cool looking user interface and experience. Just really good, cool project. React Testing Library, we talked about it. It's big. It's used all over the industry. Look at all the other kinds of React testing libraries there are for you to explore as well. We're going to be using some of the documentation here. Okay, so this is basically what we're going to need. Now, we don't need to install any of it because this app, the one that we're testing, and most of your apps were created with Create React app, which has all these already packed inside. If you were not using Create React app, Bootstrap app, then you will need to install it. Just comes in Create React app already in one of the most recent versions from 3.3 onward. And in fact, the React testing library does not come like, it comes in the package JSON. And if we inspect the package JSON of our app, we will see that there. Let's take a look here. Package JSON. We see these packages that are already sort of installed there. We did not install this manually. This came when we bootstrapped the app. Okay. Only one thing you need to remember to run the test, we'll do npm test. And so on. So first of all, let's make our lives easier. Let's enable VS Code's just auto completion or IntelliSense so that we don't have to remember as much the name of these functions. So what we need to do for that is create a config JSON file that has this content inside. So in my app, I'm going to create a new file. Make sure that in the React app. JS config.json, and I'm going to paste that content there. And that's it. Again, this is not really necessary. What this will provide us is auto-completion for just related stuff, which is nice to have, not necessary. Okay. We reviewed the app. Now let's write some tests. So for writing tests is very common just to have a test folder. We are going to create our folder, or test folder inside of the components folder. I'm going to call it tests. And underscore underscore test underscore underscore is just a industry standard. Don't ask me why, because I don't know why they decided to put underscore underscore. My intuition is for just quickly telling them apart from the rest, or telling this folder apart. You can have, as you're building like large apps, maybe you have like multiple size, like multiple pages, for instance. So you're gonna have like big components that takes care of one of the pages of your apps. each one of those could have like its test folder. It doesn't, it's not that you have to have all of them in one folder. In fact, you can organize them as in whatever form you want. If you see that a section of your app is big, better to break it down and have that section have its own test folder. Okay, so once we have our test folder, we just need to create a file. Now, the first component we're going to test is the donation card. So another convention is to call the test the same as the component, donation card, that test.js. This is another convention, test after the name of the component or after the name of whatever it is you're testing, .js. Okay, so we create that. Just like in our components, we're going to need to import React from React. And we'll import a few more things. Let's put this here to the side. And this here as well. Okay, so here we actually took a, this is the component itself. We took a look at it. Actually, we did not take a look at this component. This was the donation card. Donation card basically is this guy here in blue. It has, I think it's a paragraph. I guess we can take a look at it. Donation card. It has a div. Well, it's made out of an li that inside has a div. And it just has an h5 that is the Joe donated 251, and it has a p tag that shows the message in this question, in this way, a question, do you love me? And that's pretty much it. An h5 for the name and the amount, and a p tag for the message. Okay, cool. So we'll test this component first, and what we want to test is that this component receives some props, a name and an amount and a message. Let's just make sure that those actually display. So we're gonna import React from React. We also need to import, these are new functions, import render and screen from the @testing library React. The render function is the one we're going to call with our component to render the component. And the screen, this screen is just an abstraction for what will be rendered, basically. It's not an actual screen. They just, developers like to call objects in JavaScript, for instance, but they're not really objects. They're an abstraction of a real object. This is the same thing. This is an abstraction of a screen, and the screen will let you kind of see what is showing up in the screen, or you're gonna query the screen, which is will be where our components are rendered. Just know that it's not a real screen. And let's import then our component. Card from the current folder, actually the parent folder, donation card. Okay, we have that. Now here we write a special kind of function called test. And its most basic level is just a function. It's a function that takes two arguments. One is a string, a description, and the other one is a function. Test is a function that takes a description and a function. Here, let's just do the description here is what are you testing? In this case, we're testing that donor card or donation card. Actually, let me just copy this description here. We're gonna test that donation card displays the donor name, the message, and the amount. Okay, so the first step here to test that is we need to render the component. The way in which we'll render the component is by just calling render.
You have an extra single quotation mark on line 5 before donor card.
Thank you. Yep. I have a misspelled amount. Oh, like quick plug here for this extension, code spell checker. If you don't have it, I cannot live without it. For spell mistakes in your code. So I don't know if you noticed that, but yeah, here the amount is misspelled. I can do command period and it gives me suggestions. Live server for a non-English speaker for sure. Okay, render, we call it, pass in our component, and we invoke our component. So we do donation card like that. Now, this component expects some props. Let's just pass them here. Anyone remembers the props that I needed? Oh, well, actually, I don't remember if I called them name, message, and amount. Let's see.
Yeah, it was a key, message, name, amount, or something like that. Yeah, so it's a key.
Got it.
Yeah, there you go.
Right, name, amount, and message, basically. Name. Let's type a name here. Amount. Corey is wealthy. Let's put it donated 100,000. And let's say message. What would you like to say here, Corey?
Wubba lubba dub dub. Wubba lubba dub dub.
Wubba lubba.
Perfect.
Okay. Cool. We have our props, and then we can assume that that's render. Now, to see what is rendered, then we'll use the screen. What we'll do is, so we expect a header to show up with the text. We expect header with a text that says Corey donated. Oh, actually, let's lower the amount. Well, actually, it doesn't really matter. But what I'm thinking is, I think the maximum in the slider is actually like $1,000. So Corey will be donating more than is allowed. Actually, that shouldn't really impact the results. It's just that it will be 100% fulfilled. So it should say Corey donated 100,000, and missing a zero here, and a message, and basically just this underneath. Okay. Actually, this is a p tag with message. Okay, so we want to verify that our component is showing these two things. For that, then we will use the screen. That's where the screen method comes in, the screen function. And what we will do is we'll do screen dot. And when you get that, and this is the auto completion that first step is providing, there's a bunch of functions here. Find by all text, by display value, by role, get all by text, query, and so on. These are the functions that we're going to use. These functions are called queries. You can think of like querying the screen or querying sort of like the DOM. This screen is really like an entry point for your DOM, and you can query what is being displayed there. One query we're going to use is get by text. Get by text. And well, we plan to get something by text that has this text in it. So actually, I'm just going to copy this. Excuse me. That. And oh, also, so this is the way that we're going to query. We're going to get something from the DOM, or in this case, from the screen, for that. And we expect that to be like a header. So let's do header. equal that. We're gonna store that header in that variable, and we're gonna do the same for the message. So let's just copy this. Ooh. And for the message that we expect is this. Okay, so we are basically querying our screen, our DOM, to see if these two things are appearing. And then we can say expect, these are the new functions. We can say expect header to be in the document. To be in the DOM is deprecated, so you shouldn't use that one. Use to be in the document, just like this. We'll talk about what this means. Okay. Just like this. Let's make sure that I did not make any mistakes. I'm trying to do this from memory. npm test. Remember, that's the command that we're going to use to run, and we can see that our component is, our test is passing, and we can see the name of the component. But this is the first test we write. We shouldn't be so faithful that we wrote it in the first time and it's going to just work on the first time. How could we break this? How can we check if it's how can we break this test, basically?
Conditionals?
What do you mean a conditional? Henry. Like, or tell me a scenario where, yeah, this is a better question. Tell me a scenario where, tell me the behavior, actually, tell me the behavior of the donation card that will cause this test to break.
Negative.
Like a negative amount here?
Mm-hmm.
That's actually a good question. But that won't make it break. Oh, actually, no, wait. That's a good one. We get it fails, and that's good. It doesn't fail because the number is positive or negative. But let's find out why it fails. So one thing here, once your test fails, this is all like just outputs. You can see the fail and stuff, and we get a message, and it says unable to find element with the text Corey donated 100,000, and then it gives you this could be because some reasons, but underneath that it shows you like it prints the HTML that you could think of it as the HTML that is rendering. And we can see here that there's a body and there's a div, and we see an H5 with the text inside, and we see a p tag with the text inside, and so on. This is going to be very helpful. That you want to look out when your test fails. Look at the HTML that this is going to print, because it's going to help you troubleshoot your error. Now, this is here pretty clear. It says unable to find an element with text. Corey donated 100,000. Any comments or thoughts on this?
So it's like, actually, the question would probably be better, yeah.
Yeah. Wait, was that? Do you want to ask a question?
I was gonna make a comment. I'm like, oh, because it's like it's cool that it just like it actually shows you where exactly it is, and provides more than just like a crazy error,
Mm-hmm.
It is way more objective, so I think it's pretty cool.
Right, but like, what would you say? Like, what is the reason why this is, or how could you reward this? Can anyone try to reward this to say it in a different way? that still means that. Like, what is causing it to break?
It's not matching the string in any of the elements.
Thank you, Joey. Exactly. We are expecting an element with this string, right? Corey donated 100,000, but our component is rendering Corey donated minus 100,000, right? So this is the part that will make it break, because we pass in, we're rendering Corey donated minus 100,000, but we're expecting to show Corey donated 100,000. So yep.
Should it be written, instead of writing Corey donated 100,000, should it be written with like backticks, like saying, like plugging in the name in the curly brackets and then donated, plugging in the amount in the curly brackets?
That is a better approach. That's correct, and I'm glad that you're suggesting it. So let's do this. Let's define some variables here. Let equal name, but equal, that's not JavaScript. Say Corey. Let's say let amount. 100,000. Couple mistakes. Message. Oh, what was that? Let's just paste this here. Okay, and then instead of sort of hard coding that here, let's just pass this.
Line 8, Aleo. Amount.
Line 8?
Twice. Yeah,
oh.
to the message.
Thank you.
Are you using
Pair
Vim?
programming. Yeah.
I don't
Cool.
think you can use message twice.
Oh, that's a good point. We'll fix that. Amount. I guess like sometimes my Vim shortcuts don't work. And I don't know what's up with me that I put amount. Okay. So that's there. And let's put maybe then instead, let's say header, let's say message p tag. Okay, and then as Asia mentioned, let's use curly brackets here, not curly brackets, backticks, to do the interpolation. So say name, donated, amount. And we actually need to put this $sign. The $sign is being expected, so let's put the $sign here. So what's this? Donated that dollar amount. And that's it for that, right? And here, let's use this message. Okay, let's then expect the header to be in the document and the message paragraph to be in the document. Let's trace that. Awesome. We have our test passing again. If I change anything here, like donated, let's see, capital D, now our test should fail with that same error, unable to find that exact text. Now here, important to note is this is all about like the philosophy of the React testing library, where how does a user find stuff in your app? They find it by the text that they're reading, and that's why they provide get by text. We're gonna use a few others like get by label, and so on.
I have a question.
Yes.
So instead of like, I guess, like how would we know if like if the test would pass if a new person donated? Like would we have to write like another like name, amount, and message for that new person?
So you would think so, but we actually don't need to. Like this is already, so there's two sides to that. One is this is already guaranteeing us, this test is already guaranteeing us that whatever we pass as the props will be what's displayed. On the other side is, what if we want, I think the other side that you're thinking about, maybe unconsciously a little bit is, what happens when we have like multiple cards and we want to check that each one has its own different value in here. But that will be, we will test that, or basically we'll test that there are different cards that show different values when we're testing like the recent donations component, for instance.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that goes into like the integration testing versus like the end-to-end testing.
That's correct.
Okay.
This could be considered a unit test because this is like a very small unit. So it'll be unit test versus integration test.
Okay.
And again, that line is a bit blurry in components, but just have that in mind. Okay, any questions or thoughts about this? We saw there's a few things new. Questions or thoughts about that? Take a look at what's new here and ask away.
I guess I've got a question, Alejandro. So if this is our first experience on writing tests, like how do we know what the different things are, like that we can do get by test or to be in document or not to be in document? Like how do we find those? Or
Good question, thank you. I have put a few things here that actually I think that's the perfect segue into that. Let's close this one. This is the app itself. And here, so there are some common queries. So whenever you get something from the DOM or from the screen, you're gonna be using queries. And let me expand this here. Here, and these are some common ones. Get by text. These are all screen that, wildcard. To find more, look at the documents here, at the documentation. There are some differences between get, query, and find. So there is a get by text, query by text, find by text. I'm not going to tell you. You should go and read the documentation for like what the difference is. We're going to see one sort of embedded in one of the examples. But the documentation basically will show you all the kinds that there are. And here we're sort of touching the surface on the ones we are seeing. So that's the queries. That's how you can get elements from the DOM, from the screen, to make sure that they are there. And then another part is matchers. There is DOM matchers, which are the function that we call like here, like to be in the document. Is one of those matchers. Where did they go? To have value, to have display value, to be required, to be disabled, are all DOM matchers. And there's also jest matchers, like to be, to equal, to have been called, to match, to be tricky. I linked to the documentation here. And basically, the basic structure is this. the basic structure, I guess this is doing some scrolling. You have the expect function. You call that function and you call it with an element or a property of an element. We haven't seen the property of an element yet. And then you do that, you close the expect there, and then you say that match whatever matcher you're expecting, like to be in the document or to be equal to. And sometimes to the matcher, you can pass what value you're expecting, and so on. So this is the basic structure for expect. And this as a whole is called an assertion, which is something I realized that it's language that I actually realized I've never used anywhere else. But know that when you're testing, a test can have multiple assertions. For instance, our test here has two assertions. It has the assertion that the header is in the document. It has the assertion that the paragraph is in the document. So this is small. Actually, I came up with this like this morning of like how can we, what are the parts, and I decided to put it in there. Other questions maybe regarding this? How, like, I'm surprised about, so from the things, the new things that are there are functions here that you have never seen. And you might be wondering where they're coming from. Like, where is expect coming from? There's nothing called expect. We don't import it from anywhere. What would you say? Anyone? Or actually give me an example of another function that seemingly comes from doesn't come from anywhere. Other functions that you could just use.
Math comes from JavaScript.
Math. So like math.pow for power, math.syn for and all the others. Okay. And those seem to, like, we don't have to import the math module to use it. What's another example somewhere else? There's probably the first line of JavaScript you wrote use this function.
Console.
Console.log.
Yeah.
What was that, Henry?
There's array.
Array, right? The array constructor function or constructor, right? That seems to come from anywhere. We can say let A equal new array. Marvin, do you have something else too?
Nah, like, I think that Corey's going. But those things, I guess I didn't really, until now, I guess I didn't really like consider those, like, you know, like it's kind of cool to kind of look back at and sort of think about like, where did all of these even come from? You know, it's kind of like looking at it with fresh eyes is really cool. So yeah, like, but also those, I'm not sure if these would count, but like those, I guess those like class methods, like array, like .isArray, we could check to see whether or not something's an array or not. Like those things also count, even though those are like classes, right?
Yeah, those are methods in the class. Yeah.
Okay. Those are all methods. Yeah, they all come with JavaScript, like with Node and stuff like that. Okay.
Right. And so console, like you've been using console log, probably, as I said, that the first line you wrote was this, and at first we don't care where it comes from. We just care that it works, and it's similar here. But this console log, something has to load it, right? And you know, under the hood, there's must be something that makes it available for us to call. And it's just that, you know, developers in JavaScript found out, well, there's these things that we need all the time. Let's just make them available in the global scope because we just need them all the time. That doesn't make sense to have to import them. And I don't know if you guys have seen like other programming languages. Like I think
C++, you call them.
C++, they have like the top, maybe even like 50 lines of code are just importing stuff. But yeah, in JavaScript, we have a lot of stuff. This is what we call like built-in and stuff like that. Now, expect and test are two functions. In fact, here's an example, for instance. Actually, let me see how we're doing on time. Let's just see this and move on. If I go to the source folder and I go to the components and then test folder, right? And we're here and we have the call and we call node donation card as if we wanted to execute this file with node. It should break. It should break saying, oh, well, it breaks saying it cannot import React. Actually, it didn't break for the reason that I wanted it to break. It broke because Node does not understand import. Node needs required. But what I wanted to basically say is that these functions do not come from anywhere. They come from Jest. They don't come from anything weird. They come from Jest. And Jest makes them available to all .test files, basically. So if you want to find out more about these functions, you will find it in the Jest documentation. So you can Google Jest expect, and you will find information about it. Jest test, you will find information about it. And again, Jest will load those because this is a .test.js file. So that's the also importance of the name there. It's not that it's a convention, but it's also important for Jest to identify the file and load this extra stuff. Okay, cool. So let's move on. Actually, even before that, any questions or thoughts of what we've seen so far before we take a look at just another example, and we're going to be building a little bit on complexity as we go. Okay, so actually, I want you to do it this one. I want you to create a file called progressbar.test.js and implement these two tests there. So let's create the file here. Tests, similar to what we did here. We're gonna call it, what did I say? Progress bar. Progress bar test.js. And what I want you to do is to attempt to write these two tests. Don't forget to import the stuff. Actually, let's do one test first. Let's do this one. I want you to write a test that asserts that the donation, the progress bar shows the amount in this format. It's a similar test to the one we wrote earlier. So let's take 6 minutes to do that. Actually, also, just give me a thumbs up let's do this in the participants tab. Give me a thumbs up if you clone the repo and are following along. No worries if you didn't, as long as you're paying attention. So give me a thumbs up in the participants tab if you clone the repo and you're following along. No judgment if you didn't. Okay. I see about half, more or less, maybe a bit less. Okay. Cool. To those, I want to give some time to attempt to write this, and then we'll talk about it. I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. After this, we'll just take a quick break. Oops. We'll take a quick break, and after we talk about this test.
And we're testing to see if the progress bar is displaying the correct amount, right?
That's correct. The correct information in the format.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, if you come across questions also.
Sorry, what do we have to, sorry, I didn't get what we have to test in the progress bar, sorry.
We have to implement this test. I'm gonna share it here in the chat. Cool. Oh, Douglas, I see your comment. That's good. That's fine. Okay, let's do maybe 2 more minutes. Okay, anyone wants to share what they tried, what they attempted, if they worked, maybe it didn't?
I'm still finishing up lines right now. Sorry.
Okay, now let's take some more time then. I think that's probably also most.
When you're naming your test in that the 2 parameters that it takes in, does it have to be like the actual like what you want the test to pass by, or just the description?
That's a good question. Any string will do. So it doesn't have to be. However, it's highly encouraged that the description or that whatever you put in there describes as accurately as possible the expected behavior.
Okay.
Without being like too long. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Because once you have, like here we're gonna write maybe 5 tests, but once you have thousands of tests in a big app, you wanna be able to find what is the function, what is the thing that stopped working, and through that description, you'll be able to know what broke, and then it will also tell you like the number, the file it broke in, and all that. So that's why it's kind of similar to like commit messages, right? Like we want to have explicit and descriptive commit messages. It's hard, but we know that is good.
Okay, I got it.
Good question. Other questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
So when you do get by text, it's checking the elements and trying to find that text in one element?
Yes, that's correct. We're gonna see that. Actually, do you want to show your screen if you want? That's exactly where we're going next.
Oh, no, but my question is like, then how we know that it's actually a H tag?
Okay, yeah, we'll also see that right next.
Oh, okay.
Okay, cool.
And,
yeah.
And then I think the component has like a span kind of inside. the text.
That's correct. We're gonna see that. Did you write a test?
Yeah, it's not passing.
Okay, let's take a look. Do you want to share your screen? Because you have the point where I'm exactly where I'm heading next.
All right, I will share my screen. There. Do you see it?
Oh, there, hold
Alejo's gone.
He's gone.
Alejo is gone for a minute. All right.
Back, guys.
So I don't know if I should just continue where he left off or give him a minute.
He said he has problems with his internet. He'll be back.
Were you be able to see my screen or not?
Yes, we were
That's
able
correct.
to see your screen.
Oh,
You want to try again?
okay.
Okay.
Probably take it from here.
Oh. So what do we get back when we run this? What do we see? What's our test tell us?
Oh, this is what our test is telling.
Okay, hang on. Alejo is messaging me. Is it? I'm asking him what he wants us to do. Okay. So it says it's unable to find the element with this text. Raised a $20 of 2,000. This could be because the text is broken up by multiple elements, right? So it's telling us exactly why it might be doing this. So in this case, you could provide a function for your text matcher, or you could make your matcher more flexible. Right, so where we are right now is the reason this doesn't work is if we actually go to our progressbar.jsx, right, we can see that we have that span there on line 12. And so when we're grabbing this element, we can't, and we're trying to grab this whole string, we don't actually have it because we're split into these two different elements, right? This element is nested inside. So a couple options. And I'm not sure what the option that Alejo is planning. He is writing me back, so that's cool. But we could go ahead and grab the first half of this, which is the raised amount of, and then we could also go ahead and grab our second half. So we could do two different grabs. So why don't we update the tests to do something like that? Oh, Alejo's saying that I should just announce a 5-minute break, but let's just finish this part and then do that.
And then I would just put the total here, right?
Yeah, so we're going to have that $sign too. Yeah. And if I'm not, I think that's everything that goes in there. Right. Okay, so now we can expect a couple different things, right? Let's expect both of those. Okay. So if we do this, we get some passing, right? But if we want to be even more sure, there's a couple other things we can check as well. we can check a parent node. So maybe we can make another assertion where we expect our span dot parent node, which is a property that we get back. It's going to actually be a property directly on span.
On the span.
So if this parent node, and we're expecting that its parent to be our header, right? So we can just say dot to be.
B. And header here.
And our header, yeah. So that,
okay, let's go.
Let's see if that still passes.
Yep.
Awesome, right? And we can even go deeper to make sure that this is actually a span. We could also say, oh, Alejo is back. Alejo, I just carried on. I didn't give us a 5-minute break yet.
Yeah, that's totally
This
fine.
is where we're at. Sergio is currently writing. You want to take it from here?
Sure.
So,
yeah. Questions?
So does line 17 replace line 14 and 15?
17 replace line 17. That's actually a really good observation. Yes, implicitly, yes. But you should be explicit about what you're asserting. Yeah, like you could do it without just with line 17.
Okay.
That's a really good observation. Great. Yeah, this is great. We saw then that we had to break the getting of the elements into two because the text is split into two different elements. And yeah, this is great. And we want to also check like that the span is inside of the header, which is nice. Any other questions or thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah, we were also, just because I'd continue, we were also going to check to see that the tag of our span is in fact a span.
Yeah, we can do that. Sergio, how would we do that?
I don't know. You tell me, but I will type it. If you tell me.
That's good. That's good. Anyone wants to take a stab?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
How do we test that the header is actually a header tag or that the span is actually a span tag?
I don't remember all the properties of HTML tags, but maybe there is dot type that you can check.
You have the right intuition, which is a property of the element. So basically, this is something that we didn't see, but we didn't talk about it explicitly. When I showed you the general structure, which is expect element or a property of the element to match the matcher, it turns out that header variable that we have here on line 11 and line 12, for instance, those two variables are actually holding an HTML element, and it has the same properties as if it was running in the browser. So it has style, it has class. What other HTML properties? Has like ID,
alt
text, stuff like that. There's one we can use to verify the name, which is tag name. Oh, there we go. Corey just shared it. So what we can do is expect header that tag name to be an H2. So that's what we'll write down here. Okay, let's run this test. Okay, what are we seeing here? Oh, Sergio, could you add a little bit of zoom to this terminal? With maybe just Command plus. Oh, there too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's caps, yeah. It received the capital H.
That's correct. Tag names in the HTML element are capitalized, so we'll need to capitalize ours. Great. Now our tests are passing. Let's just do the same for the header. No, sorry, for the span, I mean. Absolutely. Great. So two things to remember there. One is that these variables header and span are actually HTML elements. They have the usual HTML properties like tag name, style, ID, etc. Here we're using, we talked about the matchers, and where did we say to be is a matcher that comes from where?
That comes from just, right?
Say that again?
Just, right?
Just, that's correct. And not just DOM. That is correct. And to be in a document comes from just DOM, for instance. Okay, other questions or thoughts in here? Could you repeat that? Seeing some stuff, some stuff in the chat. Cool. So let's take a 5-minute break before we move on to test the form, which should be a bit more interesting. Grab water, stretch, use the restroom, whatever is needed.
That Alejandro, that last line, was it expect parentheses span dot tag name dot to be span?
To be in quotes span, yes, that's correct.
Okay.
The string.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, give me a thumbs up once you're back. In either the reactions. Cool. Thank you, Amin. Cool. Thank you, Joanne. A few more seconds. Okay. So let's jump back in. Let me share my screen here. Okay, so we tested that. I'm gonna leave. I'm actually not gonna write this test, but we'll talk about it. Let's talk about it here. This we saw this. Here actually, let's show an alternative solution is there is this get by role function. And you can see that here. I'm not bringing it from the screen. You can also access those queries from the return of the render function. But what's interesting here is that I get by role and I type in heading. Heading will get me the H2 tag, and there is a matcher call to have text content, in which we could do it in one go. But here, just interesting, the heading role, getting stuff by the role from the page as well. What else? Oh, so here, this is what we do for checking that the progress bar displays the correct percentage. We can have some sample amounts, and we pass those as props, and we simply here do just progress text. We do the same math that the component would do to display the raise amount, and we concatenate the percentage sign. And what we'll do is, we expect something in the screen, which again is the, here, let's actually go back there. I actually should have not closed that. Here it is. That will be this text. We want to make sure that this text is showing up, the 44.10% in this case. What we did there is, that's part of the progress bar. So we render the progress bar again on this separate test, do the math, put the percentage sign, and we just get from the screen, we get the progress bar by that text. And then we expect that to be in the document, to be rendering, to be showing up. And here we're doing this extra sort of test, which is, or extra assertion, I should say, that checks that the style, that width property of the progress bar will be equal to the progress text, which is 40%, 50%, 44.11%, anything like that. Note here that we're doing this style dot width, and as I said in the beginning, with this testing, you cannot test like how your CSS is affecting your page. This style dot width is because we are passing the width, the style attribute, if you will, here in our progress bar. Yeah, here, this style here that we're passing, that we have there, we pass it here. So we're giving that style from like what I like to call like JavaScript world, basically. And because of that, we can do that assertion. If that styling was being done with CSS, we could not do that assertion. We could not check that something is a certain width. Questions or thoughts about this test? So all these tests we've done so far are like basically we're just asking, are the things that are supposed to show up showing up, and are they showing with the right content? So that's sort of like the first part, and all those were functional components, and so on. Also, like review this lesson later, because it has like some explanations that maybe is different from the way that I'm explaining it verbally, and so on. Okay, we're gonna move on to testing the form component, which is a little bit more elaborate, especially because it has some functions. It has the handle form input function and the handle submit function. Oh, something I forgot to mention is this app, the one we cloned. It has different branches. The master branch is the one we are working on. There is one branch called tested app. That tested app has all the tests already written. So for your review later on, it has the tests already written. Master is what we've been working with. And I also put a small note about that here. Okay, so form is interesting because we're gonna need to use something called fire event and user event to simulate user interaction now. Like this is sort of like the next notch where we are simulating the user interacting with our page, and we wanna see that those things are happening. Okay, so for that, let's just create another test file. I'm gonna leave this empty. You have them already. I call it form.test.js. We're gonna import a lot of the same stuff from the previous ones. On this, which one? I'm gonna copy this from here to the test. We're not gonna import the donation form. We're gonna import the form now. And oh, something I forgot to mention here. This is not super critical, but whenever we have multiple test cases, like we're gonna have for the form, we wrap them in a describe block or a describe function, like this here. So let me copy this. So we basically, here actually, describe is another function that, similar to test, takes in a description and a function. Inside of this function is that we will put our test, and the description is just like, what is the thing, what is the sort of enclosing thing or overarching thing you're testing, component in this case. Describe is not really that much special. It's just made to group tests together, basically. Doesn't do anything else that concerns us at this point. And then here we're gonna have a test. I'm gonna copy the second test already. This one. Oh, one little thing that I did not include in the README is, so let's try to run our test here. So we have donation card progress. We have a console log. Okay, so all the tasks passed. This empty test, what you can do is you can do test that to do, I think, and that just sort of only with description. Okay, just saying that I cannot pass the function. That just indicates that to do that I have a test that I have to write down. That is like, you know, if you want to like write the test first, the test cases first, and then implement them. There's a small thing there. Okay, so handle input changes. The form handles input changes with the handle form input function when typing or editing a value. So this is a little bit more of a complicated test case. What we want to do here, in the past example, we were looking at everything was showing up and then was showing up what we expect. Here we're testing more of the behavior, and here we're testing a little bit of implementation. We're testing that the function, the event listener we have, is being called whenever you type something in the text box. But that's functionality that we want because by listening to the input boxes is that we're going to gather the information to then send to our backend. Let me see. I think somebody just got in. So, okay, cool. So let's do this one. Handle input changes when editing a value. So first, we will need to, we have the form. Let's just render the form. The form is expecting some props. In this case, we could pass those props. I don't remember if I did in the lesson. Let me see. Yeah, you can see that we're passing those, but they're just empty. We're not testing that. We're not testing that at the moment. What we want to test, though, is that the handles form input function is called, and we're going to see what this is. So I'm just going to pass in the handle form input function. And here we need to provide a function. And basically what we want to do is we want to know if this function gets called when the user types in a box, basically. That is what we want to check. For us to know if this function is called when the user types in a box, we will need to what is called a spine on the function. We need to spy on the function to know if it was called. And the way in which we do that is we make a mock function that let us that report to us whether it was called or not. So for that, we're going to create a function here, handle form input, and I'm going to call it the same, but mock at the end. And we call just that fn like this. And this is the function that I'm going to pass to my handle form input prop here. In the normal app, that will be a function that comes from the parent, and it will set the state and all of these other things. But here we just want to check. Basically, this is a little bit, this is why we were saying that unit test and integration test is a little bit blurry here. Because here, what we're really checking is that whoever the parent of form is, which passes a function, that form will call this function when the input boxes change. We're testing our event handlers basically at a basic level. So then once we have that, what we want to do is then simulate user events. Let's simulate a user typing in an input box. So for doing that, we're going to need to grab the input box first. So I'm going to call let const name input. Now, and here you might be thinking, well, we can't use screen.get by text because, well, an input box doesn't have any text. And the text that's inside of the input box, that's called the value. So to get an input box, we can use get by display value. That's if the input box has some content inside, or more accurate query will be get by label. And again, this goes back to the importance of all your input boxes having a label associated with it. So if I do get by label, if you recall, our form has a label on each input, and I'm going to call it name. I'm going to get a label name. Actually, I'm going to need to take a look at the form to see what our label was. Label name, okay, capital N is our label. And capital M for message and amount to donate. We're gonna need those. And I'm gonna write one and you're gonna let you do the others. So here I wanna get an input whose label is name. And then I wanna check, so what happens if we console log that name input? I just wanna see if something shows up. Okay, just something that reassuring as what I had mentioned earlier. When I console log name input, we can see this object being console logged that's rather big, and that is an HTML input element, and it has a bunch of stuff. Okay, so we have that. We could. So a separate test from here could be we test that the form shows up 3 input boxes. That could be another test, like another test here, basically. Is something that says form shows 3 input boxes and a donate button. This could be a test. And this will be a test, the kind that we have already written. I'm going to do it to do, just because we are not going to implement it. So that is a test that will just show, assert that what is expected to show up is showing up. But here we're more interested in the behavior now. So the next thing we need to do here is then we know that in React, when we type anything in an input box, the event listener will be called to set the state, right? That is staple React pattern. So what we want to do is just type into this input box and see if handle form input, our function, the mock function, is being called. Now, how do we fire an event? For that, we will use, we'll import here. Actually, I'm going to need to look back at the lesson here. I don't remember exactly. Okay, we're going to import fire event from React. So let's do that. Fire event from the testing library React. And then we'll be able to say fire event. And on what element do we want to fire the event? Actually, fire event, is it that type? No. Just take a look back here. Oh, got it. We'll use user event that type. Note how we're using user event here. We'll use fire event. You might be wondering what's the difference between fire event and user event. Let's just import user event. User event we'll use first. one thing important here about user event under the hood uses fire event. And my recommendation is try to use user event. If you can't do something with user event, use fire event. User event has most of the stuff we need. We will occasionally need fire event for moving the slider. That's the only thing. But for the most part, we can use user event. So the way we do that is we call user event that type. And then here is what element do we want to type on? I want to type in the name input box. And what text do I want to type in there? So let's say there I want to type Alejo, and that's it. We have this console log in the donation card test. Let me get rid of that. And let me get rid of this console log as well. So with user event, we can type something into an input box. We're simulating, actually. We're not actually typing. We're simulating the type. And then here, we're going to do expect the handle form input mock. Expect this function. And here we're going to see a new matcher to have been called. And from the have been called, we can little like this, to have been called. We want to expect that that function was called when after or when this event was happening, when the user was typing in that input box. Let's take a look at that. Okay, that works there. Let's look at, there's this that I saw in the comments now, like when you want to negate an assertion, you can do not to have been called. Let's see, this should fail. That's correct. It fails because the function was called. The function was not called. And we can even see that we can even see that the function was called 5 times. This again, user event.type is simulating the user typing in a box, and the user types letter by letter. Even if they have like a very good typing speed, it will still be letter by letter. And we see our function being called letter by letter. So you can call to have been called. I think there is n times. Let's look at the others. There is to have been called times with and call with. I like this one. This is the one that I've been using the most. I just care that it was called at least once and what the result of the last call was. So I do here to have been called last with the text Alejo, or whatever was typed. So number of calls to have been. Did I say? Yeah. To have been last call with Alejo. This should work actually, but oh right. No, actually. Wait, does anyone see anything weird? Handle form input.
The syntax on line 19 is right? You're just supposed to like add the assertion at the end of that, like expect, you invoke it, you put what you're expecting, and then dot.
That's correct. Let's take a look at what I have here. Okay, yeah. The thing that I forgot about is the implementation of the function, of the handle form input function. Let's take a look at it. Let's take a look at that. If I open the form, well, basically what I'm trying to say is that the function is being called with 2 arguments, name input and the actual value of the input. And that's because if we go to the form component, we see here the function, and that function is being called with the ID of the element, which is going to be name input, or message input, or amount input. So it gets passed with the ID and the value, basically. So here, what I need to make sure is that when I'm making the assertion here, this is what is expecting to be called with Alejo, but in reality, the function is being called with name input and the value of Alejo. So this is what I need to actually expect. Let me move this control.
So that has to do with like the arguments that you're going to pass in on the test portion, right?
That's correct. I have to pass in the same arguments that I'm passing in the actual function.
Okay, gotcha.
So to have been called last with, oh, but actually this is interesting. Because
Would
if we
you
have
need
two
like an
arguments.
ID? Because I remember on the form you're calling it to have like on the thing you have written before, you have like to have been last called with, and it's two arguments there as well. It's like two separate string arguments. So maybe you have to just throw that in there instead and throw the actual variable for name input.
I think so. That's correct. Thank you for that. Yeah, we got now everything is passing. We expect our function to have been called last with these two arguments, name input and other health value. Again, here, like as I forgot her name had mentioned, we can just do the variable. Let's say name text. So, and we just replace that here. So that we don't have to. Okay, so this is then how we can mock a function and assert that is being called on something. So I want you to, oh, actually I think we're gonna let this half an hour more. Sorry that I budgeted not enough time. I want you to basically do the same thing for the message input, and to try to do the same thing for the slider input, or at least think about what should we do with the slider. But let's take 5 minutes to do the same thing for the message input.
You said with the slider, right?
Yes, the message first, and then the slider, or at least thinking about how to do it with the slider.
Oh, question. So being that we're testing like the message that exists inside of the form, we don't have to render the form twice, do we? Or do we have to render the component for each test, even if it's like the same component?
That is a really good observation. Yes, you could think you would think that we don't need to re-render why don't we render once and then test? The problem with that is that your test will be sharing state in a way. They will be sharing the common form, which then makes your test a bit less reliable because something that gets changed in one test could affect the other test.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. All right, thank you.
That's a really insightful observation.
Appreciate it.
Okay, let's do one more minute. Okay, anyone would like to share what they've got?
I could share. It's not complete, but I don't mind sharing. So,
sure.
Okay, so let me do that. Okay, so where I'm like confused, I guess at the moment is that like, so for the entirety of the form, we're working with like a mock version of the handle form input, right? And the handle form input function, right? Like it takes in like an event and it fires. Well, it's fired by the function handle input change, right? Like if you look inside of the form section here, but we're trying to test the message, and the message has an on change like attribute that's firing that handle input change. So I guess I was like confused about like which function I should mock. You know, since the entirety of the function is doing this, so I started it by utilizing handle input change. So I don't know if I'm heading down the right path.
I see. Like, actually, this is great. Right. So we don't want to test handle input change because like you can think of it, handle input change is the one that is a local function to the form.
Right.
We want to test the one that is being passed as props, which is the handle form input.
Right. Okay. Cool.
Also, this is great. This is a good example because so here you're writing another test for testing the message, which is fine. You could do that, but for this case specifically, we could based on the message on the name of the test, we could write those assertions in the first test itself.
Oh, like as in like just a more expects, right?
That's correct. Like more assertions.
We don't have to double it, pretty much. So I'm gonna.
That's correct.
So like I'll get rid of this, and then we can literally just write expect. So it'll, since we already have that function, right? We already have the high right here, and we're expecting to maybe to have been last called with maybe message, and
that's correct.
Yeah, so it would be.
But even before that, you need to make sure that you get the message input, that you type something into it, and then lastly that you expect that it was called with the last thing.
So we need to grab the message input first, right?
That's correct. Let's do that.
Gotta be const message input, right? And we're gonna use screen get. So we'll also probably be grabbing that because that's the message input just gonna be. I keep forgetting which assertion that would be. That would be get by let's just let me
So,
just
yeah,
so this would just be get by label, right? We have the
get by
label.
label as well.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay.
And the only way in which you can get input elements is by label. Oh, actually, I said by label and by display value.
Right.
I'll let you guys explore display value on your own.
Okay.
But
Cool.
by label is great for this.
Great. And then this text should be message, right? I'm pretty sure it should be
correct.
Yeah, it should be message. Let's go message.
And remember that the label has actually capitalized name. So capitalized name, capitalized M.
So I'm just right there. Have been last called with, and this is actually going to take in message, right? And then that's going to take message input as the second argument, like that. So if we're dealing with like, so all in all, like say if we're testing the form and we're dealing with like inputs and things of that nature, we can literally write them as just more assertions inside of this test.
That's correct.
Cool. Okay. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of like what is like a guiding principle for like when you should break it off.
Yeah.
If your test if you see that you're adding a lot of expects in one test, that probably means you need to break it off.
Like to separate for cleanliness, right? Right. Things like that. Let's give this a try. It should be updating, but I'll just restart the testing thing. Yeah, so.
And I want to ask the question of anyone that sees something that Marvin is missing here.
Let's see. I think let me. I already started it, but let me take a good look here.
You're missing the user event for the message input.
The user event? Oh,
and then also for the expect, the one that you're expecting the message, you forgot to wrap it in.
Oh, the backticks, right? This right here, and then $.
Yes.
Text we call the variable, right? And before you put the user input, right? The user input.
So Aranza, could you like guide him to do the user input, the user event part?
Yeah, sure. It's just user event, message input, comma, and then backticks, $. Same thing as the name.
So actually, let me interrupt you guys here. That backticks and curly bracket, backticks and interpolation is not really necessary. You're creating another string that's not really necessary. You could just put, message text or the variable itself.
Okay.
Right. And I have to actually create the variable, which is another thing I forgot, which is text. So I guess I'll just put hello or something. And then I can just literally just put message text here.
Yeah.
And then
only do the backticks and curly brackets. What is this thing called? I don't even remember the name. Yeah, interpolations or template literal. Right. I think is like the more formal term, but only do that whenever you want to plug in text in between other pieces of text, rather than like here, when this is like just by itself. You won't need the. Basically, whenever you're concatenating strings, the template literal is better.
So it looks like it's having a problem with the template literal here actually not template, the interpolation on line 17 maybe.
Okay. Let's get rid of the interpolation part and then let's take a look at the error.
Okay. So I think I probably did not.
I think also line 22, it's message input.
Oh, okay, cool.
For the ID.
Right, message input like that. And does that mean I also have to change? I don't have to change anything on line 16, right? That's just the label. So that's fine.
Does he still need the curly brackets for line 21 and 22 for name text and message text?
I don't think I do.
Those can go away, yeah.
Those can go away, yeah. That's cool.
So do we not need the user event? I mean, I didn't get the word.
It's going to be message text, not message input.
Right. Okay, so let me get that going.
Good catch.
Me typing too fast, if you should.
And message input is camel case, I think.
Right. So it starts with here, and then that should be so message input, name input, name text, message text. Right?
You guys will be the best text editor Helping you catch all of these. Imagine if that could. This is cool. Okay, let's take a look.
Okay, yeah, still something up, right? So.
Okay, it's taking like about 10 seconds. It's a bit slow, but that may be because it's like screen sharing and all that.
Yeah, my computer's like going hard right now, so probably it right now. Yeah. So it says that it has a problem with line 17 with the user event.
But let's read the error message if it shows anything.
Sure. Let me see if I can make this bigger for everybody. Let's see. Okay. So scroll that up. So let's see. Type error. Oh, user event. User event is not a function.
That's correct. There's one part missing here. Has anyone seen that? Is line 17 and 18.
User event dot type.
Dot type, right? So it's right here, right? And then that's what's being invoked, right?
That's correct.
Okay, cool.
Because you want to type in that input box.
Okay, cool. So user event gives us access to all of those. Okay, right. All right, that makes a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm.
So anything else?
And I want to say like these errors are necessary.
Yeah,
are necessary for you to make.
To get this. Now it's telling me it can't find property type of undefined. Let me just save it and see whether or not it's that first. It's taking like a hefty minute right now. Okay, yeah, so that is a problem. So
wow.
The type.
That one is interesting.
Yeah. So it cannot be property type of undefined. Name input is here. Could it have something to do with how I'm writing on a line 15?
No, so this one is actually kind of tricky, but is the way you're importing user event. Right. You're destructuring user event from user event, but don't destructure, remove the curly brackets.
So I can literally just grab this directly from user event.
That's correct.
Okay, cool.
And then here we're gonna see another thing.
Oh, it's error city. Okay.
No, this is great. I think you're being a really good example for how this would go.
Okay, so
thank you for that.
These are the arguments, maybe just like before. So this one has message input. How do we?
So also, like, want to draw your attention to expected and received. Those two things are going to be key for you to debug test cases. You see where it says expected and received. So it's expecting to be called with name input and Marvin, but it received message input and hello.
Wow. Okay. So this should actually be, wow. So it's receiving, but I only have message input here. So this should also be name input as well. Or no.
No. Yeah. Any ideas from someone in the audience?
And it's like definitely on line 22 that's being weird. The opens is being called message input, message text. But we're calling we're referencing like message input and message text here.
Mm-hmm. Here's a question for everyone. How many times is the handle for input being called?
11 times. Right?
11.
11 times. It says right there, right? Okay, yeah. Who can break down why 11?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, it's the two arguments. I think on where it says 6 and 11 under received, it's like calling it for each letter inside of my name and inside of hello.
That's correct, right? That function, that's the behavior we expect. We expect it to call it on each letter. So it was called 11 times, 6 for Marvin, and then 5 for hello, right?
Yeah.
The thing is that then the function gets called here. So you should have that assertion right below it. And later on, so basically the function last got called with, actually what you were doing is correct.
Yeah, so like moving it all the way up underneath the message itself. Or would it be under this one, this function? We're calling it here?
One more up.
Here.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Oh, actually the opposite. Name input goes there and then message input underneath. Right. What happens is that the function is the function is getting called on for all of the input boxes. They all are reusing the same function.
Yeah.
And they have been called last with is what was the last call of that function. At this point, the last call we want is the one with the message input.
Yeah.
And at a later point, when we are typing on the name input, we want to test for that.
Wait, so I definitely still have the in the wrong order then. So this needs to be,
so
this assertion goes up top, or
let's add a line between 16 and 17.
Okay. Over here.
Okay, so first you're typing in the message input, right? And then you expect to have been called on the message input, which is good.
Oh, so that's, yeah, okay. So that's, this line 19 needs to be moved up within that space, right?
No, that line is good. Lower line 20 by 1 space.
Okay.
By 1 line.
That's right. You said it right here?
Yeah, so add a new line between 19 and 20.
Got it.
So that we can see it. And then remove line 23 and put line 24 on line 21.
Okay, so remove line 23 right here.
Exactly.
Okay, right. And then we're putting that here. Okay. So
underneath.
Sorry.
Yes, exactly. This is perfect.
So it's the order in which the assertions have to be under where it's being called.
Not necessarily, but in this case, yes.
Okay. It's only because we're using these inputs and the functions being reused. That's why it needs to be like like paired like that. But it's not like a general case thing, right?
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because yeah, like the problem we were having before was that we type on the name input and then we don't check if it was called for the name input, and then we type on the message input, and then underneath we have the assertion to check if we typed on the name input, but the last time it was actually called for the message input.
All right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that to me it's making a lot more sense. Yeah, that's cool. All right, this is fun.
Okay, great. Other questions or thoughts from anyone else?
Not really a question, but I was following along. However, I've been trying to test the code, but it's saying that they're failing, and I'm not sure why.
What is the error message, or what's?
For the progress bar, it says unable to find an element with the text 1000.
Okay. So I think in that case, what I will also ask you to do is, for now, just pay attention to what's going on, and then I'm going to send you the link to the tested app for you to compare yours to that one.
Okay.
Cool. Let me share that right here. Okay, so that was good. Thank you, Marvin, for showcasing your code and also showing us some errors that we fixed together. Where is the chat here? Okay, so that link that I just shared, it has the fully tested app that anyone can compare it to. Okay, so we are running out of time. Let's see what else we have left. I think here, right, okay. Let me share my screen. We need to cover 2 more points. Let's do this here. This is what we had. Yeah, actually, this is the same thing that we saw on Marvin's, just like in a different order. We see the name input. We are first getting all of them, and then we type. As we saw, this line is not really necessary, this line. So I'm actually gonna get rid of that one. And basically, we type on one input box, we check that a function was called, we type on the second input box, and we check that that one was called. Now, for the slider, we just need to repeat the pattern for getting it, but the way in which we don't type in the slider, and that's sort of like an exception you're going to need to remember. So for the slider, what we do is, this is where, actually, let's take a quick look here. User event React, and the first result you get is the testing library documentation for user event. And here we see documentation and we see the API. So with user event, you can do click, double click, type, upload, clear, select options, hover, etc., paste. But we don't have like a drag method, for instance, to move the slider around. And so that means we cannot do it with user event. That is where then, what was the other one? Fire event comes in. Fire event has a different API. Fire event React testing library. There is ample documentation in that. For fire event, this is the pattern. We do fire event, and then we get the element. It's just that this person is grabbing the element in the fly. On the fly there, we get by element text. And we pass in an event object. In this case, it's a mouse event. Fire event. Here, we can also do it like this. Fire event, click what element we want to click on. And this is a right click, which is just an object with button 2. This is what we're going to need to do. Specifically, this kind here. Fire event, we're going to fire a change event, the element, and we're going to pass in our object, which is going to be the event itself. This is a bit uncomfortable, but this is the way we have to do it, at least as of now. Now, for our example, what we need to do is say fire event instead of user event. And the first argument is the element slider. Second argument is, you see how it tells me here? Second argument is, let's see if I can find a comma, the event object, the event that will be passed to our function. Here we need to simulate the event, and we'll call, yeah, actually let's do this, let fake event. This fake event will be an object that has a target, actually, yeah, it has a target object. This is sort of the way that we have to do it, and that object has a value property. The value, let's say this is the value at which we want to move the slider. Let's say we want to move it to 50. And let me just verify really quickly here. Yeah, exactly what it is. Value. And then here, fire slide event. And we're going to pass in our fake event. And so a change event like this one, fake change event that we have, should also fire our function to handle form input mark with some specific value. So what I'm going to do is just copy that, paste it here. And then I expect that to be called, whenever we call it with the slider, whenever that function gets fired by the slider being changed, we will need the ID of the slider, which is what it's called. The ID is amount input and the value. So amount input and the value that we expect to be called with. So if we move the slider to 50, the value that we expect back is 50. Yeah. Let's expect 500 to make it fail first. Let's save. Test our running again. Oh, slide is not defined. Spelling mistake, slider. Oh, failed to execute dispatch event on event target. Parameter 1 is not of type event. Oh, am I doing it the opposite? Here happened while we were looking before where we forgot the type. We need fire event change. Fire event change. Okay, now we have it. We see handle input changes. We see that it was expecting to have been called with amount input and 500, but instead it was called with amount input and 50, I mean. So let's then just fix this here to expect the right amount. And then we are good to go here. So for most events, you will have something in user event that something type click, etc. But this is a good example actually for the slider. We don't have a drag event or anything that we can call. We actually need to do it like more manually where we haven't changed fire event change. And as I said, user event under the hood is using fire event change and all the other fire event methods. Questions or thoughts on this one?
So I guess like really quickly, like, can you summarize, I guess, like in what situations would we consider using fire event versus user event, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So the summary will be use user event always. Only when you cannot use user event, look at the fire change event. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Like, try to use user event all the time. And you're gonna find scenarios where you can't do it with user event. Then you're gonna look at fire event. Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome.
Other questions or thoughts? Oh, I think I have to plug my laptop. Hold on one second. Other questions or thoughts? So here, basically what we learned here was to mock a function that you pass onto your component and to have it expecting to be called. For instance, this is the second test. And again, this has some explanations of what we talked about, worth reading. This is another test, for instance. Let's take a look at this one. Actually, that's the one I had written here. This is the same pattern. Now I want to test the handle submit function. What I do is I pass that function from a mock that I created here with just fn, get the element, and here's an example of like something that I was saying earlier. I said use user event. Try to use user event for everything. Unless you can't do it with user event, use fire event. Here's an example. It turns out that there is no user event that submit or something like that to submit a form. And by looking at that, we need to do, there is a fire event that submit, and this is the way we use it. Fire event that submit, and then the form. And what we do here is I expect that when I submit the form, for that form for the handle submit function to have been called there. And let's run, the test should be running and passing all. Great. Just to put it in your radar, but actually you should try it out. I don't, last time I tried this, I tried to do like a click on the donate button to submit the form. Last time I tried that, it didn't work. We don't have time to try it now, but try that out. See if it works. I was reading around, and what I found was this suggestion on using fire event submit for the form. I think it's that. Yeah, you should look around, see if you can implement this test by having a click on the button. Okay, the last point, which we are way over time, and this actually could take also at least 20 minutes. The last point is there are some other tests we could implement here in the form. Again, review the tested app for that, but those are not as important as testing for the network request. Oh, one more thing here. This is the testing mindset. On all the testing you do, it doesn't matter if it's React, you will arrange some situation, some components. You will then act, you will simulate some events, and then lastly, you will assert. You will assert based on what was done before, what you arrange, and what the events you simulated, you assert that you are getting a given result. Always, all tests, doesn't matter if it's React or not, will have these three ingredients: arrange, act, and assert. Okay, the last test we're gonna see here is how to test if our app, when you submit the form, fires a network request. For that, we will use the following. So we create a, actually, let me copy this. We're gonna use some of this stuff. I'm gonna create a file called app.test.js. I'm gonna paste this here. I'm not sure we'll use everything, but we'll see. I'm gonna do describe app, then test. And what we want to test is the app fires network request or post request to submit submit information. I think I might have done a better job at the description in the lesson itself, but this will do. Okay, and also know that, for instance, we tested the form, and now we're gonna test the app. And note that in the app, we're gonna render the app, and the app has everything. It has the donation card, it has the recent donations list. And so you could say like, well, I could just do all the tests. I could just test the app and, you know, write all my tests in the app. And that will be more of an integration test. And you could do that, but once a test in the app fails, oh, actually, this app is not big enough to say that it will be harder to debug a test in the app. You could test everything in the app, but you're just doing it in less of an isolated manner, as well as less of a unit test manner. But here, what we want to check is that the app fires a post request when form is submitted. And note also that this is responsibility of the app. It's not responsibility of the form. The form will gather the information and call the functions that are being passed to the app. If we go here, the form is just a functional component, doesn't do anything by itself. It needs these functions from the parent, which is app. And app is the one that is actually firing a network request here with Axios, Axios.post. And it's doing that whenever handle submit gets invoked. We see that this is just doing some tests, like if we have a donor name, let's add that to the state. Let's make a copy of the state. Let's create a new donor object. Let's send that donor to our backend. Let's add that donation to our all donations array, and then just set the state, reset the state to the initial. Okay, so we know how to mock functions. In this case, though, we want to assert that our component is submitting the form, and that will be the last point we will do. For that, we'll need to import Axios from Axios, and we'll see why. What we're gonna do is we're gonna spy on Axios. We're gonna spy on Axios to see if it was called in a similar way that we did before, and we can mock the response from Axios. And the way in which we do that then is we do these 2 lines here. I actually like to, the way that I import it with a name like Axios mock, and then I just do mock Axios. It's a slightly different way that we saw, but it's the same pattern, basically. So I'm going to call this Axios mock. And then just call just.mock Axios. What this does is that just will mock Axios as a whole, and then we can spy on it, and we can see if something was called. Okay, so the first step here is this part. Let's talk about it. The first part is saying, okay, when we call the post method of Axios, what do you want it to return? And that's what mock result value once is. This is, I think, yeah, for mocking, this is the mocking that we will do. You can find, if you just type just mocking module, you're gonna find this documentation, or just also Googling the name of this function. But basically we're gonna be listening for whenever post gets called, and whenever it gets called, we're gonna reply with this object. This is the object that we're mocking as if it was coming from our backend. Our backend, or our front end, actually, our front end is expecting an object that looks like this. I don't know if you remember, but whenever you send a network request with Axios, you always have to key into the data. Like you get the response, and then you do that data. This is what that object is going to be. Then, once we have this, let's render the app. Render app. Great, and then we will do some of the stuff we did before, which is we're gonna get the name input, screen.get by label text. What do we call it? Actually, just name. And basically what we want to do here is simulating a user filling out the form. We're gonna do message. Actually, you know what? Let me copy this from the form. Now that I'm thinking about, might not be necessary. Yeah, we're gonna do this same thing. We get the name, input the message, input the slider, and we put something in it. Instead of, we know that it will be called, that our mock function will be called, so we don't need that anymore. We'll make these changes. And now that I'm thinking about it, it will be better if we have this information in variables, actually. So here, let's call this data equal an object with name. I'm going to say, actually, let's copy this. This is our object. Actually, doesn't need these quotes. This is the data that we're going to send. This is the data that we want to also type in the input box. And we can just use that here. So you can say data.name, instead of hard coding that string there, data.message. And here, data amount. And so this is what we are going to mock, the return value we're going to mock. And lastly, here, instead of hard coding also this string here, we're just going to say data.name, data.message. And here, this value will be, data.amount, yeah. Okay, so this is, again, in the testing mindset, this is the arranging part. We're arranging our application and selecting what is going to be mocked. Here we're acting. We are actually simulating user events. And the last part will be then, we'll also need the form. Now, the form is an important part. We need to fire a submit in the form. But the question is, how do we get the form? We actually saw it here, just that we did not talk about it. To get the form, you cannot get the form by text. You cannot get it by label. You cannot get it by alt text, any of those. So we need to actually get it by test ID. And so for elements like the form, and I actually can't mention any others, but elements that you're not able to get by text by all the other queries, you're gonna use get by test ID. For doing that, what you need to do is in the form, in this case, I don't know if we need to add this data test ID form. This is the only way in which we can get the form, by adding this data attribute here, data hyphen test ID. And then basically our test, what it's going to do is say let form, const. Then we'll do screen that get by test ID, and then whatever value we passed it, which is the form. Okay, so that's the only way in which we can get the form. And then we just do fire event that submit in the form. So this was the arranging and the acting from Axios. Axios not defined. Let's take a look here. Right, I call that Axios mock. So I'm gonna call it mock here.
I think you have to put the quotation marks in just that mock.
In here?
Yeah, like quotation marks, Axios, like, because it's gonna do it from them directly from the Axios package.
Actually, no, I shouldn't have to do that. Oh, I see. No, you're right. You're 100% right. You can see it here. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Axios. So, yeah, and then in a few words, what this is doing is this is watching for imports that are being made from the Axios package, and it's going to mock those. Now it says app is not defined. We have to import the app. The app will be in the outer folder, so that will be app. Cool. So now we have the app. We're firing the events. The last thing we need to do then is check that at some point Axios.post was called as the result of that. The way in which we do that, this is the same, all the same stuff. Yeah, and then this is what we'll do. Expect Axios mode.post, that function, expected to have been called once. We don't expect that to have been called twice because we only submitted the form once. And what we have here is expect that function to have been called with 2 arguments. You know, the post function of Axios, you pass in 2 arguments. You pass in the URL and the data that you want to send. So let's copy this as well. So here we're, again, just expecting that the post function from Axios, which is the one that our code will call, was invoked with the string. And actually here I could put data instead because I have already this in a variable. Yeah. This here. And we have then our, the value of having that in a variable instead. This is probably the most confusing or the biggest part on this mocking your modules, basically. But this, on any module you are importing, you can do this. I think this is the one that you will do most commonly because, well, you guys use Axios pretty often, right? Or something else? Okay, great. Yeah, if you were using something else, it will be the same pattern still. After this, there is something. This is the biggest test here. After the form was submitted and the network request was fired, we expect a new donation card to show up that has the information about of James Bond donating $500 and saying bon voyage, good trip, basically, in French, that I'm not going to try to pronounce. So let's do that. That's truly the last part here. What we can do is, we're going to do this. You're going to wait and expect after the async operation was done. Remember that network operations are asynchronous. and wait for a new donation to be displayed with the information about the user. So here's one of the differences that I was asking you. Find by text is different from get by text and query by text. Find by text returns a promise that you can wait on, and it is specifically made for this type of cases where you do perform some action in the page, and that will be an asynchronous task that will take some time. Find by text will wait a little bit before it tries to get something from the DOM with this text. In fact, now that we have like the text, let's string interpolate this here better. So we have data.name. This guy donated this amount. Something like that. And expect this to be data.message. Oh, it seems like we have some errors. Let's take a look. Oh yeah, great. This is a good error. You will find it, sooner or later. Syntax error. Cannot use keyword await outside of async function. What's the solution for this? Joanne?
You need to add async, right?
Okay. Async where? What line?
We have to add that to, hold on, we have to go all the way up, I believe. To where, I think on not line 9, right? Describe app, like that callback function there.
Let's try that.
Okay.
Nope.
There, so not there.
Is it on line 18?
Line 18. Let's go line 18. Here. That's a good guess, but no, not necessarily here. When we are inside, or any other guesses?
Oh, line 10.
Line 10, that's correct. Async here.
Because describe is isn't just like organized tests, right? But the actual test is being called inside of this function, so that's why it's got to be asynchronous.
That's correct. This function has to be asynchronous. Let's see. Oh, unable to find element on voyage. Let's see what we have here. So we can see here again the HTML being rendered with the header, everything. Recent donations. We see that there is some donations. John donated. Emily donated. Sam. James Bond donated 500. And it says bon voyage. Where is the error here? Let's see the expected and actually any ideas, or there's anything that I'm missing here?
I see a space after bon voyage, like a blank space.
This, right,
Yeah.
that's a good observation. There it is, the space. But wait, if that was what we sent.
I know that shouldn't be a problem. I just was pointing that out.
But that's a good catch. If that was there, and that's what we sent. Actually, this might be, what I'm thinking is that the form might be doing some cleanup in the input, and maybe that's where, take a quick look here, app. Oh, actually, that is interesting. If it has a space there, it should give us a space everywhere. Oh.
Are we saving it? Is this possibly an error or?
No. So actually, this is kind of like, this is unexpected. But Corey, do you have something?
Is it React removes the spaces at the trailing?
Exactly. And it's actually not a React thing I was thinking about. It's an HTML thing. When you, well, actually no, I'm wrong. It's a React thing, but if you try to add more than one space, actually no, I think I'm wrong. But I was thinking when you have a p tag and you try to add more than one space, does it actually show the space, or it gets converted to only one?
With the React maybe cleaning it up pretty much?
I think it. I'm not sure. I don't remember that.
Yeah, no, but you're right. It's because of React. React is cleaning it up. So that space is the problem. Once we have that, all our tests passing, and we have tested important functionality. This is the most. This is the biggest test, which basically is testing the functionality of the data being submitted. And actually, this test we could break into two. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's kind of long. We could break it into two. One, check that the function is being called, and two, check that if the function was called with some data, that the result of that data is showing up in a new donation card. Yeah, it could be broken into two. I'm thinking whether it's a good idea to break it into two. If we break it into two, we will need to pass. Actually, we'll still need to fire the events for the second test. We wouldn't be saving. Yeah, it wouldn't be. There's no benefit. I don't see a benefit on breaking it, at least on this one. Okay. Any final questions, thoughts?
So based on all these tests, you didn't basically wrote everything perfectly, correct? You didn't fail any test?
We see tests failing, but no,
well,
yeah.
That was because when we were writing the test, we messed up, right? But there's nothing that when we were creating the components that basically messed up, correct?
Yes, I'm not sure I fully understand. I think maybe with the one direction you can be headed in, you might have heard of test-driven development. Test-driven development, what that means is you write this first, you write this test first, and then you write the component. That is, I think, it takes some practice. I actually don't practice test-driven development. I want to get into it, but basically that means you write the test first and then you write the code to actually do the thing. But yeah, I mean, we're testing that our form is behaving in the way we expect. We're testing that it behaves in the way that it gets the job done. So yeah, we did not. You want all your tests to be passing all the time. We did not mess up in the form or any of their components. Does that provide more context?
Yeah, I guess I wanted to see what happens if it fails. And if the form doesn't behave the way it's supposed to. Not the test, but the actual form.
Yeah, actually, no, that is a very valid point. Let's say, so we have our tests. Now we have our npm test. Now we have our test. Let's say you have to. Let's say you have to add a new. Let's say you have to add a new input field in your form. That is, let's say, I'm gonna do the same thing here. Let's say you have to add a new input field that is going to be age. And the placeholder will be, I don't know, let's say 18. Form control age input. Form donor. Actually, now I'm starting to think this is a good example. Age value. Well, I guess this is this example we'll get even if we don't have the even if we don't have the form, the test. This is just saying that there is no age value. The way I was trying to go is we add a new input field, and our what I was expecting is our test here to fail, this test. To fail because we now need to expect an age data piece of data here, but it won't fail. Yeah, it won't fail actually. So let me think about another. Anyone has an example of? I mean, I guess like I wanted to do a more elaborate one. I guess a simple one is, what if, yeah, okay, this is a simple one. What if somebody else is working on your component and they forget to pass in the ID here of the element, or they change it to pass only the ID and they didn't update, they did not update the component or update, they did not update app and they did not update the test. If they did not do that, then once you pull and you run your test, you're gonna see this error saying, oh, whatever handle for input you were expecting it to be called with is not being called with that. So there was a change. Now your app is gonna break because if we're not passing those two pieces of information to this function, then our app is not going to send the information in the NET request and so on and so forth. Does that example make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Another example of that, that's a really good question, is I'm trying to think like an implementation that people could change. Another example is, let's say in the donation card, let's say if somebody removes the $sign there, now the test will fail because in our test, we're expecting a $sign, we're expecting Corey donated 100,000, but in the HTML, we're seeing that Corey donated 100,000 without the $sign. But then our test is failing again, and I guess like the job also becomes like, yeah, the job of the tester to notify us when something goes wrong, so we can go in and check what's wrong. That is better than just not knowing what's wrong and then your app not working for your users. But that's a good question. Thank you. Other questions or thoughts?
Yeah, testing just seems like a monster of its own, you know.
That's fair. That's fair. It was very intimidating for me as well. And having to prepare this lesson the first time and the second time, I learned a whole ton. This only comes with practice. Like, start doing it for your apps. You're gonna find problems. You're gonna find that you don't know how to do some things. Ask among your peers. Ask your instructor. Ask Jimmy. Ask me. You know, find an answer basically. Find someone that can help you troubleshoot. But don't let that prevent you from not trying it out and not implementing it. As I said, like, especially when you guys are going into capstone, especially at the day before, the day before demo day, you want to make sure that your app works, and a last minute pull request can break it. And I wish I had something like this. I wish I knew how to do that, so that at least I could have my front end tested, so that if anything, I could just test the backend. And I hope later on, I'm thinking maybe we can do how to test the backend as well, so that will complete the picture there. Okay, any final questions or thoughts? I know that this was a lot. This was a whole mouthful. Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. I will again let me just send it here right now. This is the lesson we were following. Reread it. There's probably stuff that I skipped in the interest of time. I tried to be very explicit and explain every bit there. But yeah, just read it. Try it on your own. There's nothing that can be better than that. Oh yeah, that's Joy is asking for the recording. Okay, yeah, the recording. Okay, the recording survived. I was afraid that it was gonna be dead after. After my internet went down. Well, thank you for the good messages in the chat. Yeah, reach out if anything. Let me know how it goes. I hope to see some capstone apps tested. Also, like, another motivation, if that is not enough, is I think from junior engineers, a junior engineer goes in an interview or get asked about a app they have, and they say they have tests written. That is a plus. That is a huge plus. That will get you a lot of points in an interview. On top of that, just peace of mind that your app works without you having to, and an example of that actually. An example of that is what happens if, actually, it happened to me like last week. I was looking at my capstone project because I wanted to, make it better a little bit. And my capstone was 2018. So that was 2 years ago. I did not have any tests. I went and tried out. There was something that that broke. I think it was because maybe the browser implementation changed something. And I had to spend a lot of time just finding what was wrong. If I had written some tests, I would have been able to locate that much more easily. But cool, that's all. Again, thank you for coming. I'll see you around, and reach out. Thank you, Corey, for inviting me.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
You're
Everybody
welcome.
test those apps. Remember, even a little is better than none, right? Nothing has, like, most things don't have 100% test coverage. So it's okay if only some of it is, right? Start small, get by text. All right. Have a good rest of your evenings. I'm still around till 6 if you need any help with anything. And then I'll see you tomorrow at 10. Thank you so much, Alejo.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
There's no checkout today, right?
We can check out.
Alejo, you might want to stop the recording.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I'll make sure to share the link with everyone.